Hello and welcome back to the Jacob and Jacob podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Robaum, joined as always by my co-host, Jacob Hare. And today we are joined by ESPN senior NFL insider, Chris Mortensen. Chris, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, guys. You just introduced me as senior NFL insider, but I was talking with Ed Werder, who works at ESPN too. I said, I don't know when they started the titles. We just used to be reporters, then it became insider, then it became senior insider, and then Adam Schefter he became a senior insider, which makes me a very senior insider under that glossary.
So, Chris, I want to go right into the news about Deshaun Watson. The Texans seem open to a trade. Obviously, Deshaun reported to training camp despite his wishes to get out of Houston. What can you say about that, and how close are they to a trade, or when could we possibly see a trade?
Well, let's face it. Deshaun Watson's decision to report was a financial decision under the new labor agreement between the Players Association and the NFL. Fines that used to be accumulated during the camps when players didn't show up but were later forgiven as kind of a peace settlement. Those no longer can be forgiven. So that $50,000 daily fine for not being in camp when you're supposed to be there under contract, you gotta pay it. So that's an economical decision, certainly by Deshaun. And I think the Texans really back 3 weeks before the April draft, they were talking to some teams and they realized that they were probably going to be open or certainly listening to offers for Deshaun. And as at this point, there's dialogue, I think, going on with a couple teams. And then I wouldn't be surprised if while we're talking, he got traded, to be quite honest with you.
That's pretty that'd be pretty cool if that happened.
Well, it's going to be interesting. I mean, listen, everybody says, well, what about the sexual assault civil allegations, a couple of which are being investigated criminally, but there's been nothing from the league. So people are saying, why would you trade for a player who might get suspended for a year? I don't think he's being suspended for a year, but listen, there's still a lot of things that we don't know. The league's had an investigation. We don't know how far along they are in this. The civil allegations, they're not scheduled to be heard until after the season's over or in January. And so therefore, the assumption is that Deshaun Watson will be playing this year unless the commissioner just decides to pull the plug, which we don't have any indications on. And I think the NFL Players Association would fight him thoroughly on it. And the other thing is he's got 5 years left on his contract, and he's going to be 26 years old in the peak of his career, prime of his career. So even if he missed a little bit of time, say 6 games, Ben Roethlisberger got 6 games once and it was reduced to 4 games. It's still a valued commodity. Next thing is, what is the team going to pay for it? What are the Philadelphia Eagles or the Miami Dolphins? And I'm focused on those 2 teams. What are they willing to pay if they're going to get in this thing? And we know the Texans are basically looking for a combination of 5 high picks and or starting caliber players.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, I guess both Philly guys.
So you're rooting. Yeah. Then you're really excited. You got Jalen Hurts. What are you talking about?
I like Hurts, but I mean, a guy like Watson, he's special. I would love to get him.
You know what's interesting about the Hurts thing, and this is just really conversational right now, is that Jalen's from the Houston area. Mm-hmm. So what if it actually happened with the Eagles? Watch it. It won't now. And Hurts was part of the package. And that's the other thing we don't know is like with the Texans, would they take a quarterback? Would they take a Jalen Hurts in return, or would they want one? Or a Tua Tagovailoa if it were the Miami Dolphins? I'm just speaking to those 2 teams right now. So it's a mystery, and the NFL's camps, everybody's reporting to camp. It's kind of an exciting time. You see a lot of news splashing around everywhere, and keeps us busy.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, speaking of reporting to camps, Packers camp starts soon, and everyone's been talking about Aaron Rodgers all offseason. So, Mort, what's your prediction? Does Rodgers report? Does he retire? I mean, there's been so many things being thrown out about Aaron. So, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, what I have heard is basically, and I've heard this for more than a week, is that he's likely to be in Green Bay, I don't know if it's going to come exactly this week, and that they'll work something out contractually to where he actually gets to walk away after this season. Now, that's what I've heard. That is clearly classified as hearsay, not hard reporting. But that's my expectation is that, and I think when he and Devontae Adams, his wide receiver there with the Packers, instantly released on Instagram the what was it, Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan, simultaneously without any caption. It kind of suggested the last dance, right? Everybody's talked about that. And maybe that's their way of signaling we'll have one more dance there in Green Bay. And then you just see what happens. But that's my expectation is he'll be playing for the Packers. Back in April when Adam Schefter at ESPN it broke that story, I was aware behind the scenes, certainly that Denver was monitoring the situation because there was some desire on Aaron's part to move to Denver since San Francisco was not going to get in the ball game on that one.
Do you know how reluctant Green Bay has been to trade him? Do you think that a trade is possible, or do you think that Green Bay has shut the door on all possible trades?
I think the Packers have probably shut the door on trades here. It's interesting. We just mentioned Watson and what the Texans are looking for, and technically, Aaron Rodgers' resume is greater than Watson's, right? But what's the difference? It's the age. And yes, Aaron was the MVP last year, but the 2 years before that, he had injuries. And, I think that Aaron, based on what I heard, maybe rededicated himself to getting his body in proper, not shape, but just getting it prepared for what a football season is. And so, but, the Packers aren't going to get, I don't think, what the Texans will get for Deshaun Watson. I don't think the Packers have a desire to trade Aaron this year. I think their desire is for him to be there in Green Bay. Unless somebody wants to blow him away with an offer that is just ridiculous, and you would think Aaron Rodgers could bring a ridiculous price, but let's not forget this. He has a no-trade clause. Deshaun Watson has a no-trade clause. So they actually get to control some of their destination here.
So, you mentioned the Denver Broncos for Aaron Rodgers, but who would be some other suitors for Rodgers?
I'll be honest with you. I hadn't heard the 49ers were not going to do it. I think that was maybe there was some kicked about before the draft or something, or behind the scenes wasn't publicized. But who you would say who doesn't want Aaron Rodgers for at least a couple of years? Well, it's simple but complicated. But Denver was the one team. And I'm not even sure they're willing to go there now or what the asking price was. And I think the Packers are their mindset is we're keeping Aaron Rodgers. We're contenders. We want to get back to the championship game and see if we can get to the big game. And that's why I think that, we're probably smarter to speculate about Rodgers playing in Green Bay, or he could take that retirement option, which people are talking about, to save money. We do know, by the way, that David Dunn is the agent for Aaron Rodgers. He was the agent for Carson Palmer. If you remember when Carson demanded a trade from Cincinnati or he was going to retire, the Bengals let it play right up to the trade deadline. And one thing that I was always reminded of is that Carson Palmer didn't need the money. At that time, and what was it, 12 years ago, whatever it was, he had about $75 million in the bank. So it wasn't about money. It was about the environment and getting out. Now, we don't compare the Bengals and Packers at all to each other in terms of culture and environment, but clearly there's a trust that's been broken between Aaron and the upper levels of management there. And ironically, it's the one franchise that does not have an owner, a single owner.
So I want to move on and talk about the Philadelphia Eagles a little bit. Obviously, we mentioned before that we're both Philly guys and big Eagles fans. And I want to ask about the end of Carson Wentz's tenure with the Eagles and his relationship with Doug Pederson. And you were one of the first to report that relationship was fractured beyond repair. Can you take us through the final weeks of that season for the Eagles that really just fell apart at the end, and how that relationship really fell apart between the quarterback and the coach?
Well, I think it was strained, and I think it went beyond Doug Pederson. My goodness, the year that the Eagles won the Super Bowl, I don't know why I'm reminding you of this. We know that Carson was having an MVP year. I'm one of the voters for MVP. When he got injured at the LA Coliseum, a place where I grew up going to see football, by the way, when he got hurt, he was going to be the MVP of the league. And I do believe they would have won a Super Bowl with Carson, but they didn't. They did it with Nick Foles. And listen, Doug had a good relationship with Carson Wentz. I think, my understanding, I've read between the lines on some of the things Carson has said, and of course he didn't speak at all the past 6 weeks from the time I think I reported about their fractured relationship. I just think they weren't really speaking to each other. I think Carson kind of felt there was a little bit of a I think he was self-reflecting from talking to people who know him, kind of maybe even pointing the finger at himself, because he'd been 5 years in the league. And you get to the point where as a quarterback, you want to kind of, it's not just have a say, it's really have great input. You want to be Peyton Manning, okay? And Carson Wentz actually, of all the quarterbacks that have come out of college, that was the one guy, Carson Wentz, I've had people say he had a Peyton Manning-like brain, be able to process it. But Doug is sitting there saying, I've got a wounded football team. I got like 3 or 4 starting offensive linemen out. I don't even have what you would say, a quality set of receivers. And so I've got to simplify things. And here's Carson, who wants to be, have more of a control. And I think that became, I think that's why the relationship had some tension. I think both guys would read it differently. And then the locker room thing, I think that was slightly blown out of proportion. I think that we had a pandemic year last year. I mean, before that, nobody was able to really kind of like interact with each other. So I think that it was more than Doug. I think the drafting of Jalen Hurts, it was not like the Jordan Love situation, but it's kind of like, there was no communication. I think whenever I've seen it as long as I've covered the league, whenever there's a quarterback that's going to be taken, fairly high is from the second round and the first round. There's just some communication. There is a good thing, but Carson was not pouting over that. I think that when you're getting your butt beat and you're not playing well, which I think Carson would tell you, he was not playing well. And then, the communication, sometimes it would get a little testy and the relationship became fractured. And then Carson wanted out, but he wasn't saying anything publicly. He wasn't going to do anything that would make it like, when you're trying to push a team into a certain position and you do it publicly, chances are you're not going to get your way. And there's no question, as you know, where he wanted to go. He certainly wanted to go to the Colts, and the Colts became aware of that because Frank Reich, his former offensive coordinator, the year they won the Super Bowl, in fact, was now the Colts head coach. And I was a little surprised that the Eagles didn't say, no, we're not trading you, but maybe it was best for all.
I mean, you think the once MVP caliber quarterback can bounce back with Indy this season?
I do. I'm a big, I believe Carson Wentz is what we thought he was. I mean, you go the year before last season when he was playing with guys off the practice squad at receiver, that last month, the run against the NFC East, he made some incredible throws and helped get them to the playoffs. And then sure enough, they're playing Seattle, which kind of feels like a nemesis. But, that spearing of Jadeveon Clowney in the back of his head in the first quarter of that game, I think number one is that's not injury prone. If you saw the play, he got speared in the back of the helmet. It's amazing to me that Clowney didn't get fined. And he was significantly concussed, so he had to leave the game. But what it also did was tell the Eagles saying, gosh, this is a couple of years now, we've had to go to another quarterback. We better protect ourselves, and that's why Jalen Hurts was drafted as insurance, which isn't a bad strategy. So I guess I'm trying to say there's no bad guys, but to answer the question, yes, I think Carson Wentz can return to MVP level, but the team has to win. I'm high on the Colts, and I think Carson will play very well.
I mean, I was at that Seattle playoff game, and the moment Carson got hurt and he was hit by Clowney, you could hear a pin drop in that stadium. Everyone just felt so bad for the guy who came such a long way in the last month of the season to get there, and then for that hit to happen. And there were some not nice things said about Clowney that we can't say on the podcast, but you had to feel for Carson.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you do. And listen, we know football is a contact sport, and things happen. Like I said, Clowney didn't get fined. Did they even penalize him?
I don't
they
know.
Might have. which was a surprise to me, but that's water under the bridge now. But I do expect really big things from Carson, and I'm too bad it didn't work out in Philadelphia, because I think when they picked him with the number 2 pick in that draft, that was truly a franchise quarterback pick.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I've been wondering this all offseason. When the Eagles brought in head coach Nick Sirianni to the team, a lot of people speculated that Carson would maybe try to fix his relationship with the team. Did Howie Roseman know in the back of his mind during that whole head coaching process that he was going to trade Carson?
Yes, and Jeffrey Lurie, let's remember, Jeffrey Lurie's the owner. He runs the team. And Howie's the VP and the general manager. But I think one of the surprising elements is I think Jeffrey Lurie felt that things needed to move on. And Wentz privately, through his agent, obviously, communicated that he did not want to be there anymore. When that happens, you have to make a measured response as to whether can we get value for him. He's been injured. So I think that, it's just unfortunate set of circumstances. And we'll see. I mean, listen, if he continues to be not injury prone, that's a bad phrase, I mean. But I think he's going to play well. Let me put it that way. Now, if he's overthrowing receivers and he's holding on to the ball too long, which great quarterbacks sometimes have a tendency to do, and it's leading them to defeat, then I think Frank will fix that. I think they're that good of a football team. And the other thing is, they're not going to put the burden on them. They're going to have a better defense than, say, Philadelphia had when Philadelphia was there. And their offensive line is going to at least be equal to what the Eagles had, which when they were healthy, as you know, the Eagles had one of the best offensive lines in football. The receivers are probably equal. Didn't think that Howie did a good job with the receivers last year. Didn't like the pick of Jalen Reagor at all. I had a lot of people, talk about Justin Jefferson, who was available, as you know, at 21, and that was not hindsight. That was going into it.
Don't remind us about that pick. That's when that.
Well, as long as you guys are Philly guys, I mean, yeah, why not? We got to have some fun here. But you know what, Reagor, it's not like he was going to be a bad player. He just, picking him there at 21, I think some people felt too high. We've had a lot of guys taken in the second round that turned out to be terrific receivers, even beyond that. And Reagor could find a role that fits him there. And especially now that they got Devontae Smith, who I think is going to be a Hall of Fame type player. I really do. Devontae Smith, and I've had they've used the Marvin Harrison comparison, but the other one is Isaac Bruce, who's going into the Hall of Fame, by the way, this in August. He was with the Rams. He's the one who caught the long TD pass in overtime when the Rams and Kurt Warner beat the Titans. And Isaac Bruce, you go back to his combine numbers, his listing playing weight, I don't know what it was. I think they listed him at 188, which wasn't true. But at the combine, Isaac Bruce was 173 pounds. And Devontae Smith, and maybe because I have, I watched a lot of SEC football, he is really good. And I think that means that Jalen Reagor will find a role that's more suitable for him.
So I want to turn away from the quarterback storylines going into next season and talk about another major storyline, which is vaccinations amongst NFL players and NFL staff. About 83.6% of NFL players are vaccinated with at least one shot. Do you think that number will grow or continue to grow? And what have you heard about the reaction of different players and members around the league?
Well, it'll grow. I think some players feel like they're being forced into this. I think I've spoken to some players who feel like they're in an age category where the risk is not high for serious illness. And there's risk in a lot of things. There's risk in the sport they play. But, this is viral. And I think the question is, do you want to protect your extended family? And I think some of them say, listen, we already take steps to do that. That's our private lives. But one thing I did like in the new COVID policy that made sense is that players or anybody who's had COVID previously, and trust me, a lot of them have had COVID previously. The immunity that you build up by having had the coronavirus, right now probably lasts, they think, anywhere from maybe up to 9 months. They don't know. They're still trying to get the data in on that. And that's equal to what the vaccine would provide. But I should know. I've got the vaccine, second shot of Pfizer on January 28th. So, and they told me, you might need a booster in 6 to 9 months. And so there's some players who've had COVID who sit there and say, I've tested my antibodies, they're there. So why do I have to go get something that still hasn't been licensed by the FDA? It's got a lot of people certainly supporting it, but let's not kid ourselves. The NFL, and I understand it, these decisions are largely driven from the business model. I mean, this is $1 billion business. Each team lost an average of, I think there was $3.1 billion lost in revenues, and the players get paid. They're part of that. And I do think, to get to my point on the guys who have had COVID and have some antibodies and immunity, is they're only asking them to get one shot. And then they'll fall into that category of only getting tested once every 2 weeks. So do I think the number will go higher? I do. I think there's certainly some pressure, peer pressure of having it done. Not everybody would do it, and I understand it. It's a personal choice. And when you hear some teams say, well, guys that don't get vaccinated may get cut, they're talking about the bottom of the roster, guys. They're talking about that, just name it. Maybe it's the last roster spot or two. Maybe not being vaccinated will be a determining factor, but it's not going to be a determining factor for a player of consequence. They'll live under the same COVID protocols they did last year. And I think we'll continue to get more data from the epidemiologists, the science world, the CDC, and in terms of how to handle it. I mean, listen, as we speak, we know that Frank Reich, who we mentioned earlier, the Colts head coach, has been identified as being testing positive for COVID, and he's vaccinated. We know that doesn't protect you, but what it does protect you from, based on the numbers so far, is that serious illness. And Frank is in an upper category. He's over 50. I'm not going to tell you what I am, but I would say there's more to this discussion than people are willing to admit. It's not political. It's personal. At the same time, it is a business. The NFL is a thriving, multi-billion-dollar business, and the players share in those revenues.
Now, Mort, I want to move off current events and talk a little bit about your career. So you've been covering the NFL since the 1980s, and I'm sure you've broken some major stories, and you have, obviously. But has there been one story that made your jaw drop or made your eyes widen? There could be one story, two stories. Give us the rundown on that.
No, listen, I'd have to go back and look. There's been numerous stories that I've broken that didn't make my jaw drop when I broke it, maybe when I first heard it. But I'll tell you this one. The story that has made my jaw drop more than any of them wasn't broken by me. It was broken by Adam Schefter when Andrew Luck retired, and he did it. Adam broke that story, and he kind of had to. I can't be, transparent on everything. With Andrew standing on the sideline of a preseason game, when Andrew had planned to announce his retirement the next day, that one made my jaw drop. I told Adam, I think it's the biggest story I've seen broken since I've covered the NFL. Although there've been numerous stories that make us shake our head. I've been involved in a lot of them, but that's my job. So, but I don't really keep a ledger of big stories I've broken. If I did, I would say, yeah, there's been stuff that's blindsided me, and then the other stuff is that you just have to go back and make sure that you're doing your job with basic journalism and reporting, as opposed to worrying about social media or being first. Being right is more important than being first.
For sure.
So, Mort, I want to talk about something really special, which was when you won the 2016 Dick McCann Award, which was selected by your peers. What was it like to win that award, and what did that mean to you?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. The Dick McCann Award has been around, and it's been suggested to me maybe, say, 10 years earlier that I was a candidate for it, and I really, here was my attitude. I mean, I'm a man of faith, and the Lord has blessed me in so many different ways. I mean, beyond my imagination. And I always felt like, I'm on TV, maybe not a big deal to me, but a big deal to, some other people. And it also makes my job a little easier because all of a sudden I'm getting phone calls to return quicker than I used to, right? But there's so many good writers and guys, beat writers who aren't necessarily on TV or didn't catch the break I caught. Door didn't open at the right time for them. It did for me. That I took great amount of pleasure in seeing my peers honored with that award, because I kind of felt like I'd been blessed enough. But when that award was, when they announced it was in 2016, and some people may not remember, but I'm actually still on my cancer journey. But in January that year, I was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. I'm still living with the residual effects. That cancer has been eradicated from my throat and base of tongue, but it did metastasize to my lungs and a few other things going on there. And so, all of a sudden I get, they say I'm going to get this award, and there's a part of me, cynical part of me, was saying, they thought, let's give it to him before he dies. And listen, and I can laugh at that, by the way. But I can remember when we went to Canton, my wife and I, Mickey and I, we went to Canton, Ohio to receive that award, but I was in no physical shape to do it. I was still in treatment. I had a feeding tube on. Didn't know how I was going to get there. All of a sudden, a friend said, look, I want to fly you there in my private plane and get you there, and we'll take you right back. So all of a sudden, there became a solution. And the reason I'm saying that is, so I was honored, but not overwhelmed that I was receiving this award, okay? Because I really felt I'd been blessed enough. And I liked seeing my peer group, guys that I think should have been recognized or should be recognized, enjoy that award. But when I went there and I got there 45 minutes before I was to go on stage and accept the award, they had a green room set up for me, ESPN did, and Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I was back there and saying, really kind of reuniting with some old friends from ESPN, from Chris Berman, Seth Markman, or a lot of people from ESPN come back and say hi. But a lot of Hall of Famers did too, and Michael Irvin and Marcus Allen, and too many to name, including Brett Favre, who was going in. Brett went in that year, 2016. Went on there, and I think just the reception I got from so many different people was so positive that I got a little more emotional about it than I anticipated. Great Red Smith, late Red Smith, maybe the greatest sports writer of them all, certainly among them. He used to always talk about all the awards he got, and he used to just peel off the brass plate off the plaque he got and use the rest for firewood. Okay, I did not do that with the McCann Award, but I will say this: that we actually got that award, and then we went back and visited with some more Hall of Famers. And Peyton Manning was there. We talked. I'm close to his family certainly, and then we got whisked away and went back to the private plane. And thank you to my friend who flew me back home. And here's the punchline to that: when we walked in the house, my wife and I, Brett Favre was still on stage giving his speech in Canton, acceptance speech. He was last to go that night. And as you know, the speeches have gone so long that they are now cutting down the class to a minimal amount of speaking time. And but I will say this. I told my wife this more than once. I said that this has been more rewarding than I anticipated. And I actually wrote a note to all the Pro Football Writers Association stating basically what I just told you.
That's amazing. You should put that in a memoir. I feel like a lot of people would love to hear that story.
If I can remember anything, yeah.
One more. We want to thank you for coming on today. Before we let you go, I have one final question for you. It's really early. It's July. We'll call it our very, very early Super Bowl prediction. But in February, who are the two teams in the big game, and who do you have winning?
ESPN can't even get a Super Bowl prediction out of me. They really can't. And yet, I've been wrestling with the idea that, well, if I do, you don't want to pick the obvious. So I wouldn't pick the Buccaneers to repeat, right? Because that, a lot of people are, and you can understand why. They got all 22 starters back. They got Tom Brady, who knows how to win, I think. But in the AFC, which I think is a really interesting conference, I've been kind of leaning a little bit to the Cleveland Browns.
Me too.
I had a little bit of a debate with a good senior executive in this league who just wasn't sure Baker Mayfield was there. I mean, I've always been a Josh Allen guy, so nobody has to tell me Josh Allen. Josh Allen was the most misevaluated quarterback I've seen in the last 30 years coming into the league. I just don't know on the Bills with their pass rush. The Browns are almost complete. If Baker Mayfield, steps up to the same high level that he seemed to be trending on, I kind of like them. And in the NFC, I just don't know. I really don't. We forget that the Saints won the NFC South last year, don't we? And we're assuming, well, Drew Brees retired, so therefore, they're not going to be the same. Well, I'm not so sure that's the case. I think they're going to be right in it. We were wondering about the Packers, what's going to happen with them. Everybody's talking about the Rams. Listen, the NFC West we have to pay attention to. So the Rams, the 49ers, if they're healthy, those teams we pay attention to. I think the Indianapolis Colts, if they are really healthy, I think they're a team to watch. I didn't answer your question, but that's what ESPN gets from me too, guys.
Well, we want to thank you again for coming on today. It was a great honor to speak with you, one of the best journalists ever, maybe even the best. And thank you again for coming on.
No, I was glad to be on. I'm not the best journalist ever, but I know this much. I'm privileged to be a member of that fraternity, especially since it was a fraternity. I had no vision that I would going to join. I was supposed to be a teacher and a coach. Somehow I ended up a journalist. It's worked out just fine though. And the guys, it was a pleasure talking to both of you. And I'd say go Eagles, but I'm unbiased.